The pregnancy test in my palm was soaked through with cold sweat. The words, "early pregnancy," on it had been my only salvation in this cold city. Half an hour ago, I was still fantasizing about how I would carefully share this surprise with Julian when I saw him tonight. I imagined him lifting me up and spinning me around, kissing my forehead and saying, "Alara, we're going to have a home." But now, standing outside the door of this hotel suite named Affection, what reached my ears was laughter sharp enough to slice me to pieces. It was my own sister Sienna's voice. "Julian, slow down. Don't ruin the wedding dress. Alara still needs to try it on tomorrow. Who cares about her? That's for cheap imitations like her. You're the queen in my heart." That was Julian's voice, the man who swore he'd love me forever, the man preparing our wedding. I pushed open the door. My eyes burned like fire as they landed on the messy bed. Julian frantically pulled on his bathrobe, tying the sash quickly. Sienna, in a silk nightgown, toyed with a massive diamond ring. That was the engagement ring Julian promised to give me. "Alara, let me explain." Julian's face drained of color in an instant, and he staggered toward me. "Explain what?" Sienna leaned lazily against the headboard, her bright red nails tracing a suggestive red mark across his Adam's apple. "Explain how utterly helpless you are without me. Or explain just how sick you are of her wooden nature." She turned to look at me, her eyes devoid of remorse, filled only with sickening pity. Slowly, she traced her hand over her own belly, her smile glaring. "Alara, I'm pregnant too. The eldest grandson of the Brooke family can't be born bearing the stigma of being a bastard, can he? You care so deeply for Julian you wouldn't want to put him in that position, would you?" My mouth opened, but my throat felt stuffed with shards of glass, bleeding profusely. "I'm pregnant too?" Those 5 words sat on my tongue, yet in the face of this utter devastation, they became a colossal joke. I clenched my teeth, crumpled the pregnancy test report into a ball, and pressed it deep into my palm. Just then, my phone screeched to life. It was the hospital. "Miss Alara, your mother has suffered a sudden cerebral hemorrhage. Her condition is extremely critical and requires immediate craniotomy surgery. The total cost for surgery and intensive care is $500,000. Please come immediately to settle the payment, or we cannot proceed with the operation." The world shattered twice in that single second. Forgetting my broken heart, forgetting my dignity, I threw myself to my knees at Julian's feet, clutching desperately at the hem of his robe, my voice a broken whisper. "Julian, save my mother. 500,000. Please lend me 500,000. It's my mother's lifeline. I'll repay you. I can sign an IO. You. I'll work myself to the bone for the rest of my life to pay you back." A flicker of hesitation crossed Julian's eyes, but before he could speak, Sienna gently tugged at his arm. "Julian, isn't all the company's capital tied up in that project? I'm newly pregnant too. Prenatal care, prenatal supplements, everything costs money. What if your sister takes the money and runs? How will you explain it to the Brooke family estate?" Julian avoided my gaze. In that moment, the coldness in his eyes plunged me into utter despair. "Alara, this situation is truly embarrassing. Doesn't your studio still have some savings?" I let out a bitter laugh. My studio? That was mortgaged 6 months ago to secure a loan, all to support his career. 7 years. I stood by him from nothing to a fortune exceeding 100 million. And in the end, in his eyes, my mother's life wasn't even worth $500,000. "Why don't you try asking Julian's uncle?" Sienna sat on the bed, her lips curling maliciously. "He's the true heir of the Brooke family. I hear he used to adore you. Go beg him. Maybe he'll take pity on you for old time's sake and give you a handout." Dominic, the man who lived overseas year-round, ruthless enough to make even Julian tremble at the mention of his name. I stepped out of the suite, letting the downpour soak me to the bone. At the end of the hospital's cold corridor, I dialed the forbiddance number I hadn't dared touch in 3 years. The phone rang twice before connecting. "Who is this?" The man's voice was deep and menacing, carrying an oppressive chill that sent shivers down my spine. "Dominic? Please save my mother." My voice choked, echoing through the empty hallway. A full 2 seconds of silence followed, then a voice tinged with barely perceptible tension. Send me the address. 30 minutes later, several black Mercedes-Benzes sliced through the rain like steel beasts, pulling up aggressively at the hospital entrance. The door of the stretched Bentley in the center was respectfully opened by a bodyguard holding an umbrella. A pair of black handmade leather shoes touched the ground. The man wore a sharply tailored black suit, his eyes deep as ink. The chill radiating from him overshadowed even the downpour outside. He was Dominic, the true head of the Brooke family. He strode directly to the payment window, a black card held between his slender fingers. His tone was flat, devoid of any inflection. 50,000. Charge it. Start the surgery immediately. Use the best doctors. Turning, he looked at me, huddled on the bench, soaked to the bone. He removed his suit jacket, wrapping me tightly in the fabric that carried the cool scent of cedar and his body heat. Who hurt you? His gaze fell on my swollen, reddened eyes. In that instant, I felt the air around us freeze with the fury in his eyes. I couldn't hold back any longer. All the betrayal, the humiliation, those 7 wasted years of youth, it all burst forth like a dam breaking. Julian, he's with Sienna now. They even have a child. They refused to save my mother. I sobbed, my body shaking so violently I curled into a ball. Just then, Julian arrived with Sienna. They had come to witness the spectacle of me being kicked out of the hospital, but upon seeing that towering figure in the corridor, they froze in terror. Uncle? 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 When did you return to the country? Julian's face was paler than when I caught him in bed earlier, his legs trembling. Dominic slowly turned, his deep eyes blazing with an icy glare that sent shivers down the spine. You've utterly disgraced the Brooke name. Cold sweat poured down Julian's forehead. Uncle, it's all a misunderstanding. Alara's stubborn. I just wanted her to calm down. Shut up. Ignoring the 2 trashy individuals, Dominic turned his head and looked into my eyes with intense seriousness. He leaned forward and, in full view of the crowd, took my icy hand in his. Alara, marry me. The entire room fell deathly silent. Even the nurse's footsteps halted. Julian looked struck by lightning, screaming hoarsely, Uncle, you're insane. She's my fiancée. She ceased to be mine the moment you made her beg on her knees. Dominic rose, towering over Julian with a gaze that regarded him as mere vermin. I offer you 2 choices. First, take this woman and get the hell out of the Brooke family. Don't let me see you again. Second, I'll have Brooke Group declare bankruptcy before sunset tomorrow. Every investment, every share, every shred of your reputation will go to hell with your cheap betrayal. Julian's breath caught, his entire being drained of life. He knew his uncle too well. The Brooke Group was his lifeblood, but in Dominic's hands, it was merely a toy to be destroyed at any moment. Made up your mind. Dominic turned to look at me. In those icy eyes, a flicker of emotion I couldn't decipher, a mix of deep affection and restraint flashed. I'll sign. My voice was hoarse as I dug my nails into my palms. This was a gamble with my life as the stake. I would make Julian and Sienna live forever in the shadow of humiliation. Every time they saw me, they would have to bow low and call me Auntie. Dominic's lips curved in an almost imperceptible smile. His long fingers gently brushed my damp hair. Don't be afraid. From today onward, you are Mrs. Brooke. Anyone who dares touch you, I'll send them to meet their maker. He murmured softly in my ear. In that moment, I saw a beast that had lain dormant for years finally sink its teeth into the prey it had longed for. My signing finger still trembled slightly. On that contract, the name Dominic Brooke was written in bold, powerful strokes, looming above my own like some formidable brand. Mother was wheeled into the operating room. The red light illuminated her chance at survival and the beginning of my lifelong battle. That night, Dominic personally drove me back to his private mansion halfway up the hillside. In the darkness, the building stood silent as an ancient castle, radiating an austere and forbidding atmosphere. I thought you dumped me in a hotel or some random apartment, I murmured hoarsely, leaning back in the leather passenger seat, still wrapped in his suit that carried the cool scent of cedar. Dominic's fingers gripped the steering wheel with long, steady precision. His gaze remained fixed ahead as his deep voice replied, "You are Mrs. Brooke, not a mistress under my name. This will be your home from now on." Home? That word felt impossibly distant to me. Upon entering, the elderly butler stood respectfully at the foyer. Unlike the sycophantic members of the Brooke family, he didn't stare at me with strange eyes. Instead, he bowed deeply. "Madam, your room is ready." As per the master's instructions, it's next to the master bedroom. I had expected a cold, stark guest room filled with shades of black, white, and gray. But the moment I pushed open the door, I froze completely. The entire room was bathed in a soft cherry pink hue, not the tacky kind of pink, but the muted Morandi pink I'd been obsessed with at 16. There was an ensuite bathroom, a full set of solid wood easels, plush long pile carpeting, and a wicker chair with wind chimes hanging by the floor-to-ceiling windows. This was the dream studio Mother had once promised to furnish for me when I had the means. How did you know I like these? I whipped my head around to face Dominic standing in the doorway. Backlit, half his face hidden in shadow, his voice was magnetic and restrained. "Your mother mentioned it. She said there was a little girl who, because she didn't have her own studio, snuck up to the attic and cried all night." My heart clenched. That happened over a decade ago. Even Julian didn't know. How could he remember? "Elora!" He took a step closer, his towering shadow instantly enveloping me. His long fingers pulled a gold-edged black card from his pocket and pressed it into my palm without waiting for a response. "This card has no limit. Tomorrow, burn that trash wedding dress Julian gave you and buy one you truly love. The day after tomorrow, at the Brooke Centennial celebration, I want you to attend as my wife." He leaned down, his scorching breath grazing my earlobe, his tone carrying an unquestionable authority. "Don't disappoint me, little auntie." That little auntie was spat out with deliberate emphasis, carrying a tension bordering on the perverse that sent shivers down my spine. That night, I didn't sleep on the pink mattress. Instead, I leaned against the floor-to-ceiling window, watching the downpour subside. My hand rested on my still flat belly as my gaze grew steadily colder. "Julian, Sienna, if you believe the Brooke name is your ticket to paradise, then I shall personally turn that door into your personal hell." The Brooke family's centennial celebration drew a glittering crowd of celebrities. Julian, dressed in a crisp white suit, appeared at the venue with Sienna, his arm around her shoulder, radiating self-satisfaction. Sienna deliberately wore a form-fitting red gown to accentuate her still flat belly, a belly she treated as her bargaining chip. "Julian, look at all these photographers snapping our every move," Sienna cooed, champagne glass raised. "Everyone knows I'm carrying the Brooke family's first grandson. Doesn't that mean the entire Brooke Corporation will belong to our son someday?" Julian, clearly still basking in the anticipation of his impending rise, kissed Sienna's forehead. "Of course. That fool Elora is probably crying her eyes out in the hospital right now. Uncle just helped cover her medical bills on a whim like he'd ever actually take her back." Just then, the banquet hall doors swung open, pushed by bodyguards. The once bustling venue instantly fell into a deathly silence. Arm in arm with Dominic, I stepped into the spotlight. I wore a minimalist dark green velvet gown, adorned at the waist with an emerald brooch worth more than Sienna's entire wardrobe. It was one of the betrothal gifts Dominic had sent last night, rumored to have once belonged to royalty. My eyes were defined with deep smoky makeup, transforming my naturally cool features into a strikingly aggressive beauty. Is that Elora?" Someone gasped from the crowd. "And who's that beside her? It's Mr. Dominic. He's actually returned." Julian's champagne glass shattered with a crack, its contents splashing across the floor. His eyes widened as he stared fixedly at my hand clasped in Dominic's, his face drained of color, turning first pale, then green, finally settling on a sickly, liver-like hue. As for Sienna, her fake smile cracked completely. In her fury, her nails dug into Julian's flesh. We walked straight up to Julian. Dominic's expression was impassive, his gaze sharp as a blade. He didn't even glance at Julian, merely speaking coldly. "When you see an elder, don't you even know how to greet them?" Julian trembled, his knees feeling like jelly. He bowed his head, his voice barely above a whisper. "Uncle. Uncle. And the lady beside you." Dominic's voice deepened, thick with pressure. Julian gritted his teeth and tugged fiercely at Sienna's arm. Sienna's eyes burned with hatred, yet under Dominic's imposing presence, she had no choice but to bend her knees. Her voice trembled uncontrollably. "Uncle. Uncle." "Wrong." Dominic suddenly reached out, his arm wrapping possessively around my waist as he pulled me into his embrace. Before the entire city's press corps, he declared, enunciating each syllable deliberately, "Call her Auntie." Those 3 words landed like a resounding slap across Julian and Sienna's faces. Julian's eyes instantly reddened with fury and humiliation. He stared at me, his voice dripping with disbelief and accusation. "Elara, you slept with my uncle just to get back at me. Have you no shame?" Smack. That slap came from my own hand. Shaking my numb hand, I leaned close to Julian's ear and whispered coldly, in a voice only the 3 of us could hear. "Julian, this slap is for the 7 years of my youth I wasted on you. As for dignity, I lost at the moment you refused to save my mother." I turned to Sienna, my gaze dripping with contempt. "Sister, remember to behave yourself around me at home from now on. After all, the future of this family's heir rests entirely in the hands of this auntie." "You?" Sienna clutched her stomach in fury, her legs buckling as she stumbled backward, nearly collapsing to the floor. I expected Dominic to step aside, but instead he shifted his body, shielding me with his arm as he ordered the bodyguard in an icy tone. "Miss Sienna is pregnant. If she can't stand properly, she shouldn't be making a spectacle of herself here. Escort her to the side hall to rest, lest she spoil the mood for the host and hostess." That evening, surrounded by the crowd, Dominic led me toward the main seat. I noticed Julian's gaze fixed on my back, filled for the first time with uncontrolled regret and jealousy. But I knew this was only the beginning. After the dinner ended, Dominic personally helped me into my coat. In the dark carriage, he suddenly spoke. "Satisfied?" I watched the receding lights outside the window and replied softly, "Not enough." He chuckled softly, snatching my hand from the shadows and pressing it to his lips with a slow, lingering caress. His kiss carried a predatory intensity, a sense of possession. "Fine, if it's what you want. I'll make sure the entire Brooke family is at your feet." I turned to look at him, doubting for the first time that this man's long-planned scheme ran far deeper than I'd ever imagined. After the dinner party, the Brooke family's world turned upside down. Julian, once the arrogant kingpin of the company, became the laughingstock of the circle. Overnight, all because of Dominic's return and that single phrase, "Call me Auntie." As for me, I was no longer the cheap secretary crouched in the back office balancing ledgers. Under the name of Mrs. Brooke, I formally took control of the independent studio Julian had acquired through a malicious takeover. "Elara, don't push it too far." That's the flagship collection slated for next quarter's launch. Seated in my oversized executive chair, I leisurely trimmed my nails without lifting an eyelid. "Julian, your memory's failing you. Those suppliers only worked with you because I spent a week on my knees drinking with them. Now I've simply told them Mrs. Brooke's studio needs priority supply. Isn't it obvious who they should choose?" "You madwoman!" He lunged forward, aiming to overturn my desk, but before he could reach me, the office door burst open. Dominic entered, radiating a bare chill. His long fingers seized Julian's wrist and twisted it with a light flick. "Ah!" Julian's scream echoed down the hallway. "Keep your filthy hands off my wife," Dominic said, his gaze dark and menacing, as if looking at a pile of trash. "Get out. Effective immediately, all shares and properties under your name will be frozen indefinitely. Since you claim the company is strapped for cash, let's give you a taste of real strain." Julian slunk away, tail between his legs. But Sienna didn't sit idly by. She bought up media outlets to publish articles insinuating my unethical practices, even bribing models at the press conference to publicly humiliate me during my debut fashion show. On the day of the show, the lights abruptly went out. Just as Sienna prepared to gloat, the screen didn't display designs. It played a recording of her and her doctor. "Doctor, round up the months on the report. As long as you fool Julian, the money's yours." The room erupted. Sienna's firstborn was nothing but a bargaining chip, a falsified pregnancy to climb the corporate ladder. Standing under the spotlight, I watched the ashen-faced Sienna below. Grabbing the microphone, I delivered each word like a dagger. "Sister, what's stolen must eventually be returned, whether it's a man or a child." Just then, police burst through the doors. "Miss Sienna, you're suspected of involvement in an international fabric smuggling ring and malicious business competition. Please come with us." Sienna was dragged away screaming, while Julian collapsed to the floor. He'd lost not only his status, but also discovered that his cherished heir was nothing but a fraud. The press conference was a resounding success. Standing on the backstage terrace, gazing at the distant neon lights, I felt an inexplicable emptiness in my heart. "What are you thinking about?" Dominic approached, wrapping his arms around my waist from behind. His chin rested in the hollow of my shoulder, and the scent of cedarwood brought me an unprecedented sense of calm. "I was wondering, why did you go this far to help me?" I turned to meet his gaze directly. "Dominic, this isn't just about repaying a debt, nor is it solely about taking down Julian, is it?" He was silent for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. He pulled an old notebook from his pocket and handed it to me. I opened it to find it filled with snapshots of my life over the past decade. A photo of me crying secretly in the art studio at 16, a side profile from my college graduation, even a back view of me standing in the rain when I first returned to the country. Ever since that day you hid in the attic to paint at 16, I've been waiting. Waiting for you to have the right to choose your own life, waiting for you to see that scumbag's true colors. I was utterly stunned. So during those 7 years I'd spent loving Julian from afar, there had been a man watching over me from somewhere deeper, somewhere farther away. The old man just made his move. If I insist on keeping you by my side, he'll force me out of the Brooke family and strip me of all inheritance rights. He stroked my cheek, his tone as casual as if discussing tomorrow's weather. "So, what did you choose?" My heart thundered. "I chose you." He hesitated not a moment. "Alara, without the Brooke name, I'm still Dominic. But without you, winning the whole world would mean nothing." In that instant, all my defenses crumbled. I stood on tiptoe and kissed this arrogant tyrant for the first time of my own accord. 10 years later, Seaside Chapel. Morning sunlight spilled over white rose petals. A delicate little boy in a miniature suit wriggled into my arms. "Mommy, Daddy's peeking at your painting again." Dominic stepped forward, scooped up our son, and knelt before me. This was his 10th proposal in 10 years. "Alara, marry me again." I gazed at the fine lines at the corners of his eyes, traces of deep affection etched by time. Meanwhile, behind iron bars in the distance, Julian endured yet another wave of regret after bankruptcy and imprisonment, while Sienna raved in the nursing home, screaming at the air, "I am the mother of the eldest grandson." Those rotten remnants of the past had long since crumbled into dust beneath the earth. Smiling, I took his hand and whispered in the sea breeze, "Dominic, I never intended to leave." This time, it wasn't about contracts or vengeance. It was because I had finally found my own everlasting rose. Thank you for watching. More dramatic love stories coming. Subscribe if you're into this kind of mess. Tell us what kind of story you would like to watch.